security concerns, who was just stripped of his access to highly classified information. We're joined now by somebody who understands these things, if anyone does, because she's been there. Nicole Wallace, former White House Communications Director for President George W. Bush. She now hosts Deadline White House right here on Msnbc, which is the single smartest show on cable news right now. Hi, Nicole. How are you?
I can't believe you just said that. Now you threw me. I forgot everything I just learned.
Okay, good. Let me ask you a couple of White House protocol questions. So in the Washington Post tonight, Shane Harris is the lead story, is the lead reporter. This strikes me as a big scoop among big scoops.
Yeah.
One of the things he says is that McMaster was taken aback to learn that Jared Kushner was taking meetings with foreign officials without coordinating them through the National Security Council and without officially reporting that he was taking those meetings. Now, that's, having worked in the White House, that's weird, right?
It's beyond weird. I mean, and we'll find out through the Mueller probe if crimes were committed through that conduct. It's also been on the radar of the intelligence community since the earliest days of the transition. I mean, before there was a transition, I think the Times of the Post broke the story about the back channel he tried to set up with Russia. So he's been having interactions with foreign governments that at best were inappropriate and unprecedented, and at worst may have involved criminal actions.
Now we've got, last month from The New Yorker, Evan Osnos and Adam Entis had that incredible piece about China, right? Where the thing that leapt out of that piece was that people familiar with U.S. intelligence intercepts said that Chinese officials discussed meetings that happened between Jared Kushner and the Chinese ambassador, at which Jared Kushner reportedly brought up his own personal business interests alongside U.S. policy interests. Now, Kushner has denied this, but that's a serious allegation. We've now got other U.S. intelligence intercepts described in the Washington Post tonight, where 4 different countries are describing what makes Jared Kushner vulnerable to manipulation, including his personal financial difficulties, his business interests, and his pursuit of foreign investors for his family's business interests while he's been associated with the Trump campaign and the administration. Here's my question. Why is it so dangerous for a senior U.S. official to be mixing his own personal business interests and financial needs with government policy?
So it's not about what you think it was about. The FBI background check isn't about the FBI looking at your answers on a form, going into the field to vet them out, and deciding if you have the sufficient character or leadership skills to be a White House aide. That's to the White House staff to decide. They go out with a single purpose. The reason for your FBI field investigation, the reason that they go out and check the answers you give on the SF-86, which is the initial form of the...
Sure. Is that something that would be referred to the Mueller team?
Well, the background check is being done by the FBI,
right.
as is, the team on the Mueller investigation is also part of the FBI. So it is possible that information could be shared, but as a rule, the background checks are usually sort of walled off. That being said, if there was evidence of criminal conduct, that's fair game. It's the Federal Bureau of Investigation that you're providing that information to. And I should say, you're told you have to tell the truth. Every piece of paper you submit has that saying on it saying you have to tell the truth. You're providing information to the U.S. government. And so, if there are lies or criminal conduct, there could be potential.
One of the interesting things, there was reporting recently in The New Yorker about Jared Kushner meeting privately with the Chinese ambassador, for instance, and that there was some concern, according to this reporting, about his capabilities to meet privately without even, somebody in the room taking notes, so that if later on the Chinese ambassador reported back to his, overlords in Beijing, though, well, Jared Kushner said this, and he was lying, there would be no way to actually verify what was said in that meeting.
It's so reckless, and I don't understand, again, the innocent explanation. I'm waiting to hear one. But it's akin to, in the transition, when Mr. Kushner met with Sergei Kislyak, the Russian ambassador. Okay, I get that. Also reported in the U.S. press to be a Russian spy master, so you got to be on your guard. And reportedly asked Kislyak if they could meet in a secure facility, secure from the U.S., that is to say, to go into a Russian secure facility. That's crazy. Then he met with a guy named Sergei Gorkov, who is a graduate of the Kremlin spy school and runs a bank called VEB, which is reported to be very closely connected to Putin's security apparatus. Why do you meet with him? The bank says, we were talking about business. Well, you can't do that. This is a transition, but even a transition, you can't do that. Mr. Kushner says, well, no, it was governmental business. It was not my private business. But why would anybody meet with a guy who's straight out of the FSB, their security services, and running a bank that we're sanctioning because they're part of the the bad guys.
Just to play devil's advocate, I get the innocent explanation would be naivete, stupidity, rather than something more.
Or also, you could say that the belief that the bureaucratic structure that exists, from the Obama administration is not necessarily trustworthy. They're trying to forge a new path. Yeah. They want to maybe bring business acumen in a way to government, and maybe felt.
I think that's a legitimate excuse. They were really paranoid about the deep state, as it's now come to be called, that all these Obama holdovers were leaking on them and were looking to do them harm. That would be the defense of why he was going into meetings without people from the State Department or the
But it's all right because Paul Manafort was there.
I'm just saying that would be the argument.
To your point about hiring the best people, right? Mm-hmm. But I think that's the point. He did campaign on having the ability to hire the best people to make America great again, and yet they couldn't find one person with the appropriate national security expertise to be with Kushner in these meetings, to be able to take the notes. And that's frankly for Kushner's protection that this happens, right? To make sure, to Anderson's point, that the Chinese ambassador or whoever else can't put one over on Kushner. My point is that that's exactly what they were trying to do. They looked at his naivete and be like, he doesn't have any kind of experience. Let's try to manipulate him. And that, I think, is also one of the things that Mueller is looking into.
I mean, I agree. I mean, to be in a meeting like that at that level by yourself, I don't know if reckless or naive, I don't know what the right word is, but it's really not a good idea for Kushner or for the United States to have somebody in there, because someone else could walk out from the other side and spin the meeting in a completely different way. You're unprotected. And so, you never would go in without a witness.
And following some of that, I think there were some checks and balances put in place with H.R. McMaster that came out where he was checking in with H.R. McMaster before he was going into those meetings.
Right, because I think, according to the reporting, McMaster was concerned about these meetings, as I think was Kelly, understandably, and they started now working much closer together, and I think put a kibosh on that.
And I think he will try to get away with a lot of those types of meetings that he had by himself by saying, I didn't know any better. Ignorance is a bliss in the situation. That being said, moving forward, everything he did and every meeting he had, he needs to be forthcoming about it. He needs to make sure that he's honest and truthful, because that's what's going to get them. Clearly, the cover-up will be worse than the crime of these meetings that he has, and that's why it's important for him to be truthful. I think, with all due respect to Carl Bernstein, I think it was a little premature for him to say Jared's in the crosshair. I think everyone's pretty much in the same boat.
Right, and Mueller's kept a pretty tight lid on things, so hard thing to know. We got to take a brief time out. When we return, one of the president's closest aides spent hours today testifying before the House Intelligence Committee what Hope Hicks said and didn't say. Next.
Tens of millions of people have switched to Unlimited on America's most awarded network.
Verizon?
Whoa, Vince, not yet. It's the network rated #1 in the nation by Root Metrics 9.
Experience to take advantage. Back now with the panel. I mean, Paul, you worked as obviously in a White House. How serious, I mean, when you have 4 countries focusing on one of the top advisors to the president, believing that his financial entanglements make him vulnerable.
Every country, not even just our adversaries, our allies too, look for ways to influence the government. I'm not shocked by that, and I'm sure if you were to pick up the intercepts, everybody is saying, how do we get
But isn't that why you get a security clearance and you've confessed everything that's potentially vulnerable?
Yes, and this is why, going back to the founding of the Republic, Thomas Jefferson said when a person, he said a man, but he was sexist, when a person assumes a public office, he becomes a public trust. And his point was you have to give everything over, and it's more true today than in Jefferson's time. And this is where Mr. Kushner's made a terrible mistake. He is a security risk. Not because he doesn't love his country or love his father or his job, but because he has these conflicts that he cannot reconcile, which is why I suspect they can't give him a security clearance.
And this is why, again, why we have nepotism rules, why you don't put someone, a family member, in a position like this that, A, they don't have the experience for, and B, they have business ties like they have in a struggling business that's in debt right now. That being said, the way I view this and talking with folks there at the White House, this is more of a blow to Jared politically than operationally. He will still be able to go about fulfilling the duties of his portfolio, while albeit limited. He will still have access to the information he will need to get his job done. And who's to say there's not going to be conversations between he and his father-in-law that will be helpful, information he may not have ordinarily been able to see.
Also, and I mean, if the president wants to show him every day the president's daily brief, even though he doesn't have a top secret security clearance, the president can do that.
The president shouldn't do it if he doesn't have a top secret security brief, and that's because he hasn't been cleared at the level that information is at, and he could compromise sources and confidential information. Yes, the president could do it, but it is one of those things where this is an incredible level of security that goes into having the people surrounding the president have this information, and the president should honor what General Kelly has done. And, I think a couple points are worth making. One is that it could be more that we actually haven't heard yet as well. This is a very long time that the security clearance was not closed. There have also been reports of failure to disclose some information. In many administrations, that alone would be grounds for not getting a top secret clearance. It is a very, very high hurdle. And so, the public reporting that we've just seen on CNN may be a piece of it, but I wouldn't be surprised.
Failure to disclose dozens of contacts with foreign governments, and then even after that it was amended, forgot to mention the Trump Tower meeting that we only learned about later on with, Donald Trump Jr.
But this is the crucial point that you ask, is the president can do whatever he wants in his White House. He is the president. And look, the president shared top secret information with the Russian ambassador and foreign minister in the Oval Office. I don't think he's going to pause
when Jared, say it like that,
when Jared and says, Pop, can I look at the PDB today?
Right.
But the problem is that he is his son-in-law, and you shouldn't bring your son-in-law into the executive office of the president, because it's very hard to get rid of your son-in-law.
And let's not forget, he did in a very public way. The president left it up to his chief of staff, General Kelly, to make that determination. That was a responsible decision. It was the right decision to make. And I think General Kelly made the right decision in across the board. It wasn't just Jared Kushner. It was across the board, looking at these temporary clearances and downgrading the ones that that needed to be downgraded.
But didn't this only become in the public eye because of what happened with Rob Porter? I mean, had that situation not imploded, would General Kelly have been given this purview to relook at everybody's security clearances? Because, to me, what's interesting is, Donald Trump made a very persuasive point during the campaign of, A, I only hire the best people, I surround myself with the best people, and B, attacking Hillary Clinton for, misusing a server, violating potentially classified information, not taking classified information seriously enough. And here he is with a White House chock full of people who don't really have much of a track record, who turns out can't get a security clearance.
The hypocrisy is astounding.
I don't think it's chock full with folks who can't get a security clearance. You have a process that's taken much too long a time, and a chief of staff who's now recognized through the problem that came to light through Rob Porter.
Right, but it's not taken that much time because the FBI just doesn't have enough folks doing it, because every administration has the same number of people essentially getting security clearances. In fact, this White House maybe even has fewer because they don't have as many people in jobs. But the security clearances do not take this long unless there's some major problem.
And there are very few White Houses who have had as many people as this White House had for so long having an interim security clearance, and at the same time sharing top secret information that is of the utmost importance on the most critical of issues, which is what the portfolio that Jared Kushner has been handed.
Well, but hang
on a second. To your point, Anderson, the hypocrisy here is just astounding, because he not only campaigned on this, but every single Republican who was so against Hillary Clinton also echoed that she would be a security risk. Look at how she handled her emails. And now, where's the outcry from Republicans? Had this been a President Hillary Clinton that would have given that kind of portfolio to her son-in-law, and then we find that her son-in-law has had all of this stuff?
Mark Msnbc, is that his name?
Yes.
With all his financial dealings and some not great successes was running around without a security clearance and representing the U.S., there would be a freak out.
There would be hellfire coming from congressional Republicans.
For a second here, though. The same people making the people with security clearance, top secret, and secure compartment security clearance are the folks still making the national security decisions in the White House, the same folks making the intelligence decisions in the White House. The NSC those folks have the correct clearances. Let's not blow this out of proportion.
But let me point out, a top secret security clearance is not that big a security clearance. I mean, there's code word security clearances which are much higher than that. Just about everybody gets a top secret security clearance.
You can't have it both ways, Anderson.
One thing, though,
my point is, you should be able to pass,
and then turn around and say, well, it's not that big of a deal.
No, it's not a big deal for the actual clearances. Right. You should be able to get it. A college student in college who applies to the CIA gets a top secret security clearance when you're working a summer job there. I can guarantee you that, and that takes a couple of months. You just have to confess everything you've ever done, and that's, seems to be the problem.
The point is that if Jared can't get a top secret security clearance, there is something in his background that is of huge interest to those who are not giving it to him, and it's for a reason.
One thing, though, I think
whether he can or he can't.
It's easy to get caught up in the palace intrigue. If we take a step back, I think this is a victory for General Kelly and for his commitment to making sure we have a White House staff that meets the highest standards we can and should do better, and hats off to him.
We've got to take a quick break. We're going to have more on this when we continue. More on the breaking news, also about the president's son-in-law and the decision to downgrade his interim security clearance.
This is Lobster Fest at Red Lobster, with exciting new dishes like dueling lobster tails and lobster truffle mac and cheese.
Substantial movement in the Mueller investigation. At the same time, after a brief lull in which he went completely silent, President Trump came roaring back on Twitter today. Witch hunt, he tweeted this morning, all caps, a sort of digital primal scream, and a familiar refrain. Former Clinton independent counsel Kenneth Starr appeared Sunday on Fox News, and the president also tweeted out a passage from the interview. Quoting Judge Starr, the president tweeted, "We've seen no evidence of collusion. I have seen nothing. The firing of James Comey and all of the aftermath that suggests the president has obstructed justice because he's exercising his power as the president of the U.S. I just don't see it." Judge Starr joins us momentarily, along with Jeff Toobin. Just briefly, though, keep him honest, it is worth pointing out we have not yet seen evidence of collusion or obstruction from Special Counsel Mueller for a very simple reason. A, there may not be any, but he's also not released anything on that, and he is not talking. He speaks through indictments and guilty pleas, and there have been plenty, some for allegedly or admittedly lying to investigators about contacts with Russians, 13 alleging tampering by Russians in the campaign to help candidate Trump and or just cause chaos. The Deputy Attorney General Rosenstein went out of his way after that one to strongly suggest that these would not be the last indictments, and some of the language does as well. So to pick up on the president's notion, there have been a lot of real witches, or allegedly real ones already, and perhaps more to come, but we're pleased that Judge Starr is with us, as well as Jeffrey Toobin. Can you definitively say, what you said is, I've seen no collusion, no evidence of collusion. Right. Because the investigation is ongoing, even if there is, you would not have seen any evidence.
We don't know. We do not know what Bob Mueller knows. What we have seen thus far suggests to me an absence. And in fact, I think that the indictment that you mentioned, Anderson, of the 13 Russians and the 3 Russian companies is actually, at this stage, a contraindication.
How so?
Because this was a huge operation, lavishly financed, organized out of St. Petersburg, Russia, very close to Vladimir Putin. It was organized by one of the oligarchs. And I think this was essentially a shadow indictment of Vladimir Putin, who had a huge operation with, there's no evidence of any collusion with any American campaign. There was some unwitting participation. I think that's an important word, the unwitting participation, which again suggests to me it's a contraindication that this was some kind of conspiracy with Trump Tower. But we'll see.
But if, in terms of just building an investigation, there's no reason why Robert Mueller would show all his evidence, and again, we don't know if there is or not, but would show everything at once. I mean, he seems to be methodically building a case.
Bob Mueller is a total professional, and one of the key things, I think, is for us to allow Bob Mueller to do his job, to get it done as promptly as he can, and he's moving with great efficiency, and I think he's moving with integrity.
Do you believe that the president, because of his role, cannot be accused of cannot obstruct justice? That anything the president does is not obstruction of justice?
No, he can exercise his power, such as in firing James Comey and so forth. And here, I just have a different perspective than some of the people who say, oh, this is evidence of obstruction. I just disagree with it. And I disagree with it based upon Supreme Court precedent. The Supreme Court has warned, don't think everything is obstruction of justice. You can impede an investigation. You can say, I think I'm going to impede this investigation. I'm going to tell someone not to testify. And the Supreme Court has been absolutely clear with federal prosecutors, you're going too far. And one of the prosecutors who was told he was going too far is Anthony Weissman on Bob Mueller's staff. Now, that was yesteryear, but that is still the law of the land. And by the way, that was a unanimous Supreme Court saying prosecutors, not everything is an obstruction of justice.
Jeff Toobin, I want you to weigh in on what the judge is saying.
Well, I certainly agree that not everything is an obstruction of justice, but the idea that the president has the absolute power to fire the director of the FBI for any reason, for no reason, for a corrupt reason, if, for example, someone deposited a suitcase full of cash on the on the Oval Office desk and said, please fire the FBI director because I don't want to be prosecuted, and then he fired the FBI director, would that be permissible too, Judge?
Absolutely not. Now, that is corruption, and that's the key. That is the key word that everyone is banting around. It is corrupt. It is a corrupt effort to interfere with the obstruction of justice. And so, exactly, I've been saying that all along. If there's any evidence of a payment or some sort of conspiracy with, let's say, Russians, we don't like this investigation, and we're going to enter into this business deal. I'm speaking hypothetically. We're going to enter into this business deal, but you've got to get rid of Bob Mueller. Then, obviously, that is a corrupt motive to interfere. But the president has been so amazingly transparent. I don't like the investigation. I think it's hurting the country. It's deflecting attention and so forth. That doesn't sound to me like corruption.
But do you think? Go ahead, Jeff.
But I mean, you testified famously and brilliantly, although I disagreed with it, that President Clinton could be impeached for obstruction of justice. But if the president of this president of the United States fires the FBI director because the FBI director is investigating him, that's not corruption, like Bill Clinton engaged in corruption for lying in the grand jury or for telling Betty Curry to lie. Why aren't they both corrupt?
No, you're talking now about a very different venue. You're talking about impeachment. I'm talking about the crime of obstruction of justice, which is thus far being bantied about. It's not Bob Mueller's prerogative to determine what an impeachable offense is. I did have that responsibility as the independent counsel. And so what we did was to bring the information to Congress's attention, and we didn't say it's a crime. We said there's substantial and credible information. So the quarrel I have is this a courthouse activity? And I don't think it is. That is, I don't think there are crimes have been committed. Or is it something that for Congress to consider? And obviously Congress has broad
Judge, let me
power.
ask you, because you praise Robert Mueller and you said you think the investigation should run its course.
Right.
If, the reporting we have tonight is that he's looking at financial dealings of then candidate Trump and even citizen Trump when he was thinking about running for president, do you believe that's fair in his purview? Because the president seems to think that's a red line.
Well, I don't know whether it's fair or not, but I do know this. Under the special counsel regulations under which Bob Mueller was reported, there is a check and a balance. That was one of the criticisms of the independent counsel law. The view was there are not enough checks and balances. There's no accountability on the part of the independent counsel. Here there's lots of accountability, and that's the Deputy Attorney General, Rod Rosenstein, can in fact step in under the regulations and say, you're not going to go there. I'm the one who, as the Deputy Attorney General, says this is a red line. So the very fact, by the way, that the indictment against the Russians was announced by Rod Rosenstein, I think is very powerful symbolically. It is reminding the country that he, as the head of the Justice Department for purposes of this investigation, is in charge.
Do you agree that this is a witch? Do you believe that, as the president does, that this is a witch hunt?
No.
No. You think it's a legitimate investigation?
Bob Mueller is a professional, and I have great confidence in his integrity.
Judge Ginstar, appreciate it. Thanks for being with us.
You're
Jeff
welcome.
Toobin as well. A great deal ahead. The president's son-in-law, Jared Kushner, will not receive a top security clearance, which may imperil his work at the White House. That and a lot more when we come back.
Sup world, it's The Box with 30% savings for safe drivers. Coming at you with my brand new vlog.
Tonight, citizen Trump's business dealings in Russia and new reporting on special counsel Mueller's focus on it. It's a CNN exclusive. Also tonight, Jared Kushner's security clearance downgrade and new reporting on some of the possible reasons why. And later, another member of the inner circle is grilled what Hope Hicks said to the House Intelligence Committee and what she refused to talk about. We begin, though, with exclusive CNN reporting on Russia and the businessman who became president. Kara Scannell and Jim Sciutto join us now. So, Jim, what are you learning?
So, Anderson, Kara, myself, Gloria Borger, Pamela Brown, and I are told that investigators for the special counsel Robert Mueller have recently been asking witnesses questions about Donald Trump's business activities in Russia prior to the 2016 presidential campaign, and this as he was considering a run for president. This is according to 3 people familiar with the matter. The lines of inquiry indicate that Mueller's team is reaching beyond the campaign to explore how the Russians might have sought to influence Trump at a time when he was both discussing deals in Moscow and considering this presidential run. Now, Mueller was appointed to investigate Russian meddling in the 2016 campaign, as well as links, we should note, between Trump associates and Russians and any issues that might arise from those investigations. However, as we've often said on the air, the president claims that any investigation of his family's personal finances would be a breach, in his view, of the special counsel's mandate.
And, Kerry, in terms of the kind of questions that Mueller's asking witnesses, what have you learned?
So we learned that he's asking witnesses about the timing of Trump's decision to run for the presidency. He's also asking about the 2013 Miss Universe pageant that was held in Moscow and questions around the financing of that. And we've also learned that he's been asking questions of witnesses about plans to have 2 times a Trump-branded hotel in Moscow. None of those plans materialized. We also learned that he has also asked at least one witness if he ever saw any Russians at the Trump Tower in New York in 2015, and this witness said that no, he had not.
Jim, do we know, are they asking questions beyond his business dealings?
Yes, we know that witnesses have been asked beyond business dealings about the possibility or their knowledge of any compromising information, compromat as it's known in Russia, that Russia either has or claims to have on Donald Trump. As you know, that this was one of the subjects raised in what's known as the Steele dossier, this collection of memos compiled by a former British special agent. And we should note that that dossier was paid for by a law firm, paid for by Democrats, the Democratic opponents, Hillary Clinton for President Donald Trump. But key that we know that Robert Mueller at least asking witnesses questions about their knowledge of, awareness of any such compromising information.
You know, and Kara, certainly when asked by the New York Times, the president agreed that there would be a red line when it comes to the investigation and his family's finances.
That's right. That's where the president has claimed that there's a red line. But the special counsel's order that really gives the authorization for the investigation says that he can look into anything that arose or may arise from his investigation. We've seen that Mueller has been very thorough and very deliberate in this investigation from the indictments that we've seen. So it may be one that is sussed out later on between the Trump president's lawyers and Mueller if it gets to that point.
Kara Scannell, Jim Sciutto, thanks for the reporting. Quite a story, quite a panel. Ryan Liz is here, James Schultz, Maria Cardona, Alice Stewart, Paul Begala, and Ann Milgram. Ryan, what do you make of this new reporting of focusing on the citizen Trump's business dealings?
Well, I mean, first thing to say is just because they are asking these questions
doesn't mean
they have evidence of it. I mean, they would be derelict in their duty if they were not asking basic questions about his relationships that are publicly known. To everyone.
And I think some of the sources that they talked to said that those sources got the feeling that the people asking the questions were just sort of checking off boxes of questions to ask.
Exactly. And so they're doing proper due diligence like any prosecutor looking into this would. I don't think this red line argument that Trump has made that said, hey, if you look at any of my business dealings before I run for president, that's a red line. I don't think that it's hard to argue that this has nothing to do with the broad mandates of the investigation. In other words, these are activities that were happening in Russia right at the start of him running for president. It's directly related to the question of meddling. So I think the Trump's famous line about, you better not look into anything previous, I don't see how that would apply.
James,
this isn't like old Trump organizations.
Do you agree with it that should be beyond the purview of Mueller?
I think we're looking at counterintelligence investigation into potential collusion and meddling in this past election. Of course they're going to look at the president and folks around him and their relationships with folks with Russia. So it's no surprise that they're going to ask questions about those relationships. I think it would be a far stretch to say now they're automatically looking into financial dealings between the president and those organizations or those individuals. But not a surprise that they're asking questions.
Should a proper investigation, though, if they're worried about collusion or compromise or coordination, shouldn't they be looking at any financial ties?
I think Ken Starr said it accurately. The person who's going to draw that red line as to what this investigation, where it should go, and come to a conclusion is Rod Rosenstein, not necessarily Bob Mueller at the end of the day. But I think they're methodically looking at the issues, and of course, prosecutors are going to look at the evidence and take it where it leads them.
I think this serves as a reminder to what Kara mentioned, that the scope of this probe is very broad. As she said, from situations or information that arose or may arise, there's going to be a lot more stones unturned.
You can read that as really kind of as broad as you want.
Absolutely,
frankly.
and as you know, we learned from Judge Starr, anything can come up in the scope of the investigation and asking people questions. I think the key moving forward for anyone that goes before the Mueller and his team, make sure you tell the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, because that will be where it may
several of them seem to have forgotten already.
And that I think is the danger. I don't think that Trump and his family are taking this very seriously. And the reason I say that is because once he has said, you can't go into looking to my financial dealings, that's a red line. To me, that would be a red flag for Mueller to actually go look into his financial dealings. And I agree. I think he would be derelict not to do that, because I think, I've always thought this, and I've said this before on your panels, Anderson, that this is more than just about collusion. This is about a president who could be incredibly compromised as the president of the United States with foreign entities who will try to manipulate him, and perhaps have tried to manipulate him and his family members. We're seeing the reporting about Kushner as well, because they could be beholden to them on all of their financial dealings, even if it happened last year or if it happened 15 years ago. That is an incredibly dangerous position to put the United States in.
And legally, I mean, the notion that the president's finances should be off the table, does that...
No, it makes no sense. I mean, there's no example you can think of in the American criminal law where someone who's being investigated gets to say what can and cannot be investigated. And so we should just say that as point one.
You mean if the cops come into my home and I say, whatever you do, don't look in that closet? I can't take that off limits.
I mean, hypothetically.
I don't even own a chainsaw. Yeah. I mean,
It's also a far stretch to say what would be and could be a problem as it relates to the president and how he can be influenced. I think that's a far stretch. I don't think that's what
Why?
Looking
Why
at.
do you think it's a far stretch?
I think it's a far stretch because now you're talking about pure speculation. That's not what prosecutors do.
Well, clearly here it's more than speculation because they're actually asking the questions.
They're asking questions about relationships.
But you're acting as if one thing has absolutely nothing to do with the other, and that is not the case. This is something that Democrats brought up time and again during the election. It's the reason why we pushed so hard for him to show.
Oh, so if the Democrats brought it up during an election, it must be true.
To show his taxes, his tax returns, because clearly that would show whether he was beholden to somebody or not, and he fought tooth and nail and even promised, and he still hasn't done it.
There's really just one question. Why?
Right.
Why? Why is Donald Trump, a man so tough he says he would rush into a school shooting unarmed, right? Why is he such a wuss and a wimp about Russia? Why? What do the Russians have on him? Maybe it's nothing. Maybe you're right. Maybe it's just nothing. Maybe there's something about Mr. Putin that our president just worships and adores. But the the evidence, the direct evidence is just catastrophic for him. Russia attacked the United States in our election. They did so to benefit Donald Trump. He won't even admit that. Russia continues to try to undermine our democracy. All of the Trump-appointed intelligence officials say so. Our president won't give the order to defend America.
On that, Paul.
Why?
I think
Admiral Rogers testified that under oath today.
Yeah, no,
His team, just a second, his family and his team had innumerable contacts with the Russians. Why? He fired Jim Comey. This we don't have to ask why. He said, I fired him because of this Russia business. So excuse us all for thinking, what do the Russians have on this guy? Our president is compromised, and we want to know why.
No.
I'm happy. No, I'm happy.
Exactly.
We got
you're saying here,
50 minutes.
The president, disputes the fact that the Russian meddling had anything to do with the actual outcome of the election. I think everyone has agreed that the Russians attempted to meddle with this election.
He doesn't.
I think he disputes the outcome of it. That's what he gets.
I think we don't know yet. We don't know. We do know that Russia interfered with our election. We don't know yet if it impacted the outcome. We don't know that. And
there hasn't been one single
of
evidence that there was any impact with the state election bureaus or the departments.
There were attempts to. There were attempts to.
Sure, there were attempps, but there was never any
the election was decided by
it had an impact on
my rough count, 77,447 votes, which swung Pennsylvania and Wisconsin and Michigan combined. That's not even a sellout in any of those states' big
Every night
football
when you
states.
count sheep, you probably count up to 77,400.
I do. I sleep like a baby. I wake up every 2 hours crying in the bed.
The president's official position is it could have been China, Russia, or a 400-pound man in his bed.
Right.
Much more to talk about, including a closer look at Jared Kushner, who some would call the president's secretary of everything, losing access to most anything top secret, and what Maria mentioned, that new reporting on how other countries apparently thought they could compromise the president's son-in-law. Countries including Israel, Mexico, China, and others also had a marathon day and evening of questioning for top White House aide Hope Hicks on the Hill.
Answer all the questions today.
You hit me like fire, shot me like a bullet, burn me up and down, no way to cool it. Every